From the moment someone becomes aware of their surroundings, they are trained to believe in what they can see, touch, and hear. The physical world is treated like the authority. If something shows up in the 3D, it's considered real. If it hasn't shown up yet, it's considered impossible, far away, or just wishful thinking. This is how people get trapped, by living as if the outside world determines their worth, their direction, and their power. But this is where everything goes wrong, because the truth is, the 3D is not the cause of anything. It's not where reality begins. It's not the source. It's the result. The 3D is only a mirror. It doesn't have a mind of its own. It only reflects the assumptions and beliefs that have already been accepted internally, whether consciously or unconsciously. So when something unwanted shows up in the 3D, it's not a failure, it's not a punishment, and it's definitely not a sign to give up. It's just showing what has been repeated and believed in the inner world. It's like looking into a mirror and seeing an old expression. You wouldn't get mad at the reflection. You'd change your expression and let the mirror catch up. But most people don't do this with the 3D. They treat the mirror like it's the one in charge. They wait for it to change before feeling better, before deciding what's possible, or before believing they are worthy. This backwards way of living creates suffering, because it places all power in the hands of a delayed reflection. The 3D doesn't lead, it follows. And once this is really understood, everything shifts. There's no more reacting to what is seen. There's no more fear when something unwanted appears, because it's seen clearly for what it is, just an echo of an old state, an old thought, an old assumption. It is not current. It's not real in the sense that it has power over what happens next. It can't decide the future. It can only show what used to be dominant inside. And because of that, it can be ignored. It can be observed without giving it meaning. And most importantly, it can be changed, not by forcing anything in the 3D, but by going back to the source, which is always within. That's where the shift happens. That's where new states are accepted. That's where the real creation begins. The moment the inner world changes, the mirror starts its process of catching up. The reflection might take time to adjust, but it always does. And the more unbothered the inner world becomes by the current mirror, the faster that reflection clears. That's why peace doesn't come from changing the outside. It comes from remembering what the outside actually is, a mirror. A mirror doesn't lead. It doesn't choose. It only reflects. And knowing that is what brings back the power that was never lost, only forgotten. There's this quiet moment that comes when it finally clicks that imagination isn't just some harmless escape or fantasy. It's not just for daydreams or creative hobbies. It's actually the foundation of everything. It's the source. It's where everything that exists right now was born. Every invention, every business, every piece of technology, every home, every relationship, none of it showed up in the physical world until someone first saw it and felt it real in the imagination. And that includes not just things, but experiences, transformations, and identities. It includes the version of life someone wants to live but hasn't seen with their eyes yet. That version already exists in imagination the moment it is accepted as real. That's how this works. If something can be imagined clearly and repeatedly, and if it feels natural and normal to live from that imagined version, then it's already on its way. In fact, it's already done internally. And the only thing left is for the outer world to reflect it. That's why imagination is not just powerful, it's the actual reality. The 3D just copies it. It mirrors it. It reflects what's dominant in the imagination, not what's wanted out of desperation or what's visualized once in a while. The mirror always shows what has been accepted, what has been repeated, what has become a natural state. And this is where a lot of people get stuck. They treat imagination like a tool to force results out of the 3D, instead of realizing that the imagination is the reality, and the 3D is the after effect. They visualize for 5 minutes, then go right back to worrying, doubting, and reacting to the 3D. But if imagination is truly understood as the source, then that 5 minutes needs to become the dominant state. Not a temporary break from fear, but the new identity that's lived in all day long. The more natural something feels in imagination, the more quickly the 3D reflects it. It's never about how hard someone works or how much they do physically. It's about how deeply something is assumed and lived internally. The inner state always leads. And when imagination becomes home, when it's the place returned to again and again, when it becomes the most familiar version of reality, then the 3D begins to follow with such accuracy and detail that it stops feeling surprising. Because of course it showed up. It was already done. It had already been lived and felt and accepted over and over again. Imagination is not something passive. It's not fantasy. It's the creative engine of the universe. It's where all change begins. And the sooner that becomes more real than what the eyes can see, the sooner the 3D will have no choice but to reflect the new truth back, because it always does. It happens so subtly that most people don't even notice it. The moment something in the 3D shows up that doesn't match the desire, the mind immediately reacts. There's a feeling of disappointment, frustration, confusion, maybe even panic. Thoughts begin to spiral. Why is this still happening? What did I do wrong? Why is it taking so long? And in that moment, power is being handed over to something that was never meant to have it. The 3D becomes the judge. The mirror becomes the master. But that's not how this works. The 3D isn't in charge of anything. It's not the source of truth. It's not the measure of progress. It's just a reflection. And when attention stays glued to what's showing up externally, especially when it's unwanted, it feeds life into the very thing that's supposed to be fading out. That's the trap. Because even if the desire has already been accepted internally, that shift won't fully express itself until the 3D catches up. And it can't catch up if attention keeps circling back to the old story. Every time the 3D is checked for signs, every time the current situation is treated like it's fixed or final, it reactivates the old state. It's like planting a seed and then digging it up every hour to see if it's growing. That constant checking kills the process. It keeps everything stuck in delay, not because the desire isn't real, but because the energy is still tied to the outer world. And the outer world only responds to what's stable within. That's why reacting emotionally to delays or setbacks isn't just frustrating. It's actually reinforcing the assumption that the 3D is in control. But it's not. The mirror doesn't lead. It follows. And the moment this is really understood, there's a different kind of calm that starts to show up. Not a forced calm or fake positivity, but a real, grounded knowing that says, what I see doesn't matter, because I know what I've already accepted within. That kind of detachment doesn't come from pretending not to care. It comes from realizing that caring too much about the mirror only delays the reflection. It shifts the focus away from the place where change actually happens, which is always the inner world. And once that shift is made, and the 3D is treated like a side effect rather than a scoreboard, things begin to move fast. Not because the 3D changed first, but because the reaction to it no longer held power. The inner world stayed steady. The new assumption stayed dominant. And the mirror had no choice but to reflect it, because that's all it can do. It doesn't have a mind of its own. It only ever shows what's been accepted as true inside. So the real question is never, what is the 3D showing me? The real question is, what am I still giving power to, and do I want that to keep reflecting? The idea of detachment is so often misunderstood. It's probably one of the most twisted concepts in the manifestation space, because on the surface, it sounds like it means to not care, to stop wanting, or to walk away completely. But real detachment has nothing to do with giving up on a desire. It's not about abandoning the vision or pretending it doesn't matter. That's suppression. That's denial. Detachment, in the way that actually works, means pulling attention away from the 3D as the source of truth and returning power back to the only place it ever truly lived, the imagination. Detachment is the process of shifting the center of reality from the outer world to the inner one. It's the moment someone decides, I don't need the physical world to prove this to me anymore, because I've already accepted it as true inside. I've already experienced it mentally. I've already felt it emotionally. I already live from it internally, so I don't need to chase it externally. It's like choosing to walk by faith in what's real within, rather than sight of what hasn't yet changed in the mirror. And the more natural that inner conviction becomes, the less urgent the desire feels, not because it's lost its value, but because it's no longer being seen as separate. It's not something to reach for anymore. It's something that already is. It's already here in the only place that matters. And that's where true peace begins to show up. Because now the 3D can do whatever it wants, and it doesn't shake anything. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't change anything. Even if it shows the opposite of the desire. Even if it looks delayed, even if nothing seems to move, none of that defines what's real anymore. The desire is already lived in imagination, so the 3D is simply playing catch-up. It's reflecting old data. It's echoing an old assumption that no longer has power. When that becomes clear, checking the 3D for signs becomes pointless. There's no longer a need to monitor, to worry, to track progress, because the work is already done internally. And the one who lives from that knowing walks differently, speaks differently, thinks differently. Not because they're forcing themselves to act as if, but because they're no longer dependent on the outside world to tell them what's true. Detachment is freedom from the waiting game. It's the release of needing the mirror to change before feeling secure. It's the return to self, the return to inner reality, the return to imagination as the real home. And once that's lived consistently, the outer world follows. It has to. The mirror only knows how to reflect, but it can't reflect something new until it becomes natural inside. And detachment is the doorway that allows that new truth to settle in and stay, not as a wish, but as a fact. The biggest misconception that keeps people stuck is the belief that their desire is somewhere far away, waiting to be earned, achieved, or found. That belief creates a feeling of distance. It puts the desire on a pedestal and places the self in a position of constant seeking. But that's not how creation works. The moment something is clearly imagined, and the moment it feels real internally, it is already done. That version of reality already exists. It's not waiting to be approved by the 3D. It's not dependent on time or effort or proof. It already exists because it's been created in the one place where creation actually happens, imagination. And once that shift happens inside, once something is fully assumed and accepted as true, then it's already owned. It's already experienced. The 3D is just catching up. It's the echo. It's the mirror that needs time to reflect what's already shifted internally. But most people don't understand this, so they keep checking. They keep asking if it's working. They treat the desire like it's still missing. And that mindset keeps it feeling far away. Because whatever is imagined to be missing continues to be reflected as missing. That's how the mirror works. It doesn't reflect what's wanted. It reflects what's assumed. And that's why the breakthrough moment doesn't happen when the 3D finally changes. It happens the moment the desire is experienced as already done in imagination. That's when the desire stops being a goal and becomes a memory. That's when the waiting ends. Because now, instead of trying to bring something in, the focus shifts to living from the version of self that already has it. This is why it's so important to stop asking if it's possible or when it will happen. The only real question is it done in imagination? Is it accepted as normal, natural, and true within? If the answer is yes, then the manifestation is complete. The 3D will reveal it in its own way, but it's no longer about getting. It's about knowing. And that knowing creates an inner calm that's completely independent of what's showing up physically. Even if the 3D looks like nothing has moved, even if it seems like the same old patterns are playing out, none of that has any power when the inner world is stable. Because the 3D doesn't update instantly, it reflects the most dominant inner reality. And once the inner reality becomes unshakable, the mirror has to shift. It may take a few hours, days, or weeks, but it must reflect what's been lived within. So it's not about chasing the 3D or needing signs to prove something is working. It's about becoming the version who knows it's already done. That version doesn't check. That version doesn't wait. That version simply continues to live from the assumption that the desire is already part of the identity. And from that place, the 3D no longer holds power. It just shows what's already true. Once the truth sinks in that the 3D is just a mirror, everything changes. The stress, the doubt, the obsessive checking, the emotional spiraling, it all starts to fade. Because why would anyone keep panicking over a reflection when they finally realize they're the one shaping what the mirror shows? It's like seeing a shadow and remembering it's coming from your own movement. The mirror isn't deciding anything. It's not the leader. It's not the one with the power. It's just responding to what you've already accepted and embodied internally. And that's the part so many overlook. They try to manipulate the mirror. They try to force the 3D to change. They get caught up in strategies, rituals, timing, and control. But the 3D isn't where the change begins. It never has been. The 3D doesn't initiate. It repeats. It reflects the current or past dominant inner state. It follows imagination like a shadow follows movement. So when something unwanted shows up in the 3D, it isn't something to fear. It isn't even personal. It's just a sign that a previous assumption is still being echoed. It's an old picture. It's outdated data. It's not a failure. It's just a delayed display. And if it's treated like anything more than that, the loop continues. That's why neutrality is so powerful. That's why detachment is so freeing. When the 3D is no longer seen as the source of truth, it stops having the ability to shake the inner world. Even when something old or unwanted shows up, it becomes easy to look at it and think, this isn't mine anymore. This doesn't belong to the version I live from now. It's just an echo, and I don't react to echoes. That kind of inner calm is a byproduct of living from the end, of trusting imagination more than the senses, and of knowing the only thing the 3D ever does is reflect what has already been claimed within. There's nothing to chase anymore when that clicks. No more seeking, proving, or waiting for validation. There's only the quiet certainty that says, it's already done. It's mine, and I don't need to look for it, because it's already real where it matters. And that kind of certainty doesn't come from the outside. It comes from a deep relationship with imagination, from returning again and again to that inner version, until it feels more normal than anything the 3D could ever offer. The truth is, the mirror can't lead. It doesn't choose. It doesn't command. It only reflects what's chosen for it. And once that's remembered, there's nothing left to fear. The outside world loses its grip. The spiral ends, and the focus comes back to the only place where power ever existed, inside. That's where the shift happens. That's where the new story begins. And that's what finally breaks the loop. So instead of watching the 3D and asking when it'll change, try something different. Look within and say, it already has. Because the mirror is just catching up. Let me know in the comments, what old 3D story are you done giving power to? And what truth are you choosing to live from now? I'd love to hear how this message landed with you.